Hello my fiery friends, the Infernoman here with the hottest in budget deck technology. And for today's deck tech, right now before we get started, I just simply want to say happy Valentine's Day for those of you who do celebrate, but even if you don't, maybe you don't have a significant other, don't fret because we've got you covered today with a deck that you're going to absolutely fall in love with. Well actually, what are we playing? Oh, Merge the Karlov Manor Constructed. Actually, I realize now we can't even say the M word there because YouTube has a habit of censoring certain things and don't like certain words being spoken about. But any case, basically you get the idea here. We're of course playing with the latest set in Constructed for only these cards. So join me today as we're going to take into the event a deck that I'm simply calling Karlov Aggro. But before we continue, if you do like any of the content that I do, please like, follow, and subscribe wherever you watch the content so you don't miss out on any of the gameplay, booster pack openings, deck decks, and so much more. Longtime viewers of the channel know how we do it. We have to talk about the stats of the deck before we dive right into it. So for our aggro deck today, we're playing Boros colors. We're split down the middle perfectly of white and red. We have an average mana curve of about 1.9. We are looking at 28 creatures in the deck, 8 instants, 8 artifacts, 4 enchantments, and 20 lands. So the deck is, well, pretty simple and straightforward. We're as aggro as we can be. We're just of course going to try to throw down as many creatures as we can, tap them, go sideways, and then just finish off our opponent with a little bit of burn to win the game.
So bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off.
Is that really as simple as it gets for this deck?
Good question!
Technically, yes, but there actually is a little bit more strategy to it. So this, of course, employs, of course, a couple of really cool cards. One card that we actually wanted to build the whole deck around was simply War Leader's Call. So we're going to talk about this card real briefly here. This 3-mana enchantment is a card that reads, creatures you control get +1/+1, and whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, War Leader's Call deals 1 damage to each opponent. So this is basically really great for the deck because we get to be super aggro and we can burn out our opponent with every creature we cast. I mean, look at how awesome this card is. This is a freaking Impact Tremors and a Glorious Anthem together. They had a baby, and this is what War Leader's Call is.
You had my curiosity, but now you have my attention.
So with that, let's now talk about the creatures in the deck. In the 1-drop slot, you have Novice Inspector. It enters the battlefield, makes a simple clue token, which can help us, of course, draw a card a little bit into the middle part or late part of the game. You have here Frenetic Scapegoat. This cute little goat here is a 1/1 haster. We honestly don't really care about all the other stuff it does on the text. All I just wanted to do is have a hasty 1/1 creature to just do more damage in the early part of the game. In the 2-drop slot, we have cards such as Seasoned Consultant here, where it says, whenever we attack with 3 or more creatures, the Consultant will get a pump of +2 until end of turn, which is great for our aggro plan. We have Red Herring here, which of course also has haste, and also it has to attack each combat turn. Well, that mostly seems like a downside. In our deck, we will again want to be as fast and aggressive as possible, and also we could sacrifice it in a pinch to draw a card. Dogwalker here is actually a cute little card that's actually highly underrated for our game plan here, because it has the Disguise mechanic. Disguise, for those of you who are unaware, is a simple mechanic that just reads, you can cast this card face down for 3 as a 2/2 creature with Ward 2. You turn it face up at any time for its disguise cost. And what's really sweet about the disguise ability is you can do it at instant speed. So as you are swinging, you can then flip this up and then you'll create some dog tokens here. Our final creature is going to be Inside Sorcerer. This 3-mana 1/1 enters the battlefield and we get to create a detective creature token when it enters. You can also tap it and pay 3 to then give a detective you control +2/+0 and gain vigilance until end of turn. Not something you need to worry about pretty much, but again, it really just, we want it for the token ability. There might be some moments where the board is going to get gummed up a bit, so as we are trying to burn out our opponent, we need to close out the game with just a little bit more action. So our other non-creature spells, we have Shocks, and of course we have Lightning Helix. Great cards because Lightning Helix is awesome for the stabilization, and Shock of course is pretty much for the course, just to make sure that we can get a little more damage to get that victory. As far as the mana base, well, again, this is a super budget deck because we're just playing for the Midweek Magic event, so I wasn't going to invest in any of the Surveil lands, but if you do have Surveil lands, by all means throw them into the deck. They're going to be very helpful for you. Otherwise, for the deck itself, you'll just go right down the middle of simple 8 plains and 8 mountains, and we'll have a set of escape tunnels, which can help us, of course, get to that 1 or 2 extra lands we need, but its other ability allows us to sacrifice it, and a target creature with power 2 or less cannot be blocked, which can sometimes make the difference between getting a swing and getting the victory, or sometimes losing, depending on how the match goes. Otherwise, that's basically it. I mean, again, as I mentioned earlier, it's a super simple and easy to put together deck for the midweek event. So with that, just a little bit of strategy that I'll add into it is, for the early part of the game, as always, try to throw down those 1-drops as fast as you can and just start doing as much damage. We don't need to worry too much about curving out perfectly here, because again, in the early part of the game, the more creatures you can throw down, the easier. However, if you do have in the opening hand your War Leader's Call, that's going to be great for us once you get to turn 3, because this can really start pumping up your game plan and allow us to do a lot more damage. We're not, again, too concerned with, again, trying to sacrifice We're not too concerned about trying to chump block too much with this deck because, again, the whole point of the deck is just to do as much damage as possible, keep throwing out your creatures, and again, take advantage of your Dockwalkers, which can flip up and basically give you a little bit of extra burn damage with War Leader's Call. Your Inside Source, of course, will do a little extra burn damage when that detective enters the battlefield as well. And then just know that, again, you want to save as much as you can those lightning helixes and shocks for going to face. If you have to sometimes do it to a creature, that sometimes might be a call that might mean the difference between getting a victory and defeat. So again, as I highly encourage you with this kind of deck, save your burn spells until you have to go to face just to clean out your opponent and finish off the game. As always, when we do play these events, we obviously don't have a sideboard option for this because, again, this is all just focused on best of one. And again, for those of you that do play standard, I'm sure many of you out there can figure out what might be the best options for you in these colors. Now, the only thing, of course, I'll mention with the deck is if you are interested in it, it's super cheap to put together, but there is, of course, a couple weaknesses that we have to acknowledge before we wrap this up. The biggest disadvantage, of course, is if your opponent has wraths, you're probably going to have a bad time, and that's going to be unfortunate for you. But that's one of those things that we have to accept with this kind of deck is we're just trying to be as aggressive as possible and try to be as fast as we can to hopefully outrace our opponent before they have an option to stabilize. With that, however, if they do have their own lightning helixes, that's also going to be a bit of a problem for us too, because that extra life gain they'll get sometimes sets us back one whole turn. So keep that in mind when it comes to this kind of gameplay, that you're probably going to have a couple losses if your opponent can go bigger than you, go wider than you, or sometimes just have better blockers. But overall, as long as you can throw out everything as fast as you can, mostly you'll be able to close out the game before your opponent can stabilize, which is again why I'm going to emphasize one more time, save your shocks, save your lightning helixes until you know for sure you need them just to close out the game. But that's otherwise all I have for you for today, everybody. I'm really sorry again, I know it's not a very big deck tech, but whenever we play, of course, Midweek Magic, for those of you who've been watching me for a while, we keep these short and simple only just because, again, you only just need to build these decks just to get your wins in. But if you are fascinated by trying to expand on this, by all means, there's plenty of options for you in Standard right now. I would highly recommend, if you do like this style of gameplay, to try to look at the Boros Convoke deck. We actually put together one that you can take into the Explorer format if you want to play mono white, but if you do want to play Boros colors, there's, I'm sure, more than enough versions out there that can get you going if you are fascinated by that kind of gameplay. Otherwise, my only other final thing I want to say on this deck is it's super simple, it's great, it's only just good enough for... Well, the deck is super simple for the event. You can, of course, expand on this if you want to take it to standard. There's obviously a lot of options for you. Granted, I don't play standard all that much, but I'm sure many of you out there can kind of figure out what are going to be the best options to go super low and super wide with it. I highly would recommend try the Boros Convoke deck if you want to take this deck to the next level. And I assure you, with that brand new card, War Leader's Call, it really also makes a big advantage for that kind of style of gameplay. You'll definitely have a lot of fun when you do play this. And if you are a fan of go wide strategies, if you're a fan of burn tactics, if you're just a fan of aggro, you'll definitely enjoy this deck, get your wins in, and I assure you, you will not be disappointed. That's all I have for you today. Thanks again for watching, everyone, and just remember that no matter what you do play in the game of life, always be sure to burn bright. Later!